Nick Khan was on the Bill Simmons podcast. Did you have any chance to listen to this way?
Yes, I did, John. Yeah.
So this was an hour-long interview with Nick Khan on the Bill Simmons podcast, and it was essentially Nick Khan going out there to, I think, try and put a happy face on all the chaos, which included the comment, from the inside, it's not insane to me, this situation in WWE. We can go over some of the individual points brought up. I will say, and I'm going to preface this interview by, number one, stating that I thought Nick Khan, I mean, he is in a situation where I feel he very much wants to, calm down the temperature on Vince McMahon and make it seem as though this is not this, I don't think he wants to, by any means, fan the flames that are going to bring more controversy onto Vince. In doing that, I felt it very hard at times to hear how dismissive he was of some of these charges against Vince McMahon. The Rita Chatterton line about, essentially equating to this as though it's a stumbling block in our way, but that comes with the territory of running a business this size. I thought it just came off very callous at times, whether intentional or not. And the fact that we are, again, it becomes very interesting to see some of the language that gets used, such as, Vince McMahon did some things he's not proud of, or like we minimize it instead of like, he is accused of rape. He is accused of coercing a woman into oral sex. It's like, sometimes we have to actually state what is being accused rather than this kind of gift wrapped it in these like more easily digestible terms like mistakes or, allegations. I mean, this is some pretty horrible stuff that he is accused of, that he is coming back to into this company. And for that reason, I did find it interesting that Nick Khan was going here. I
found it interesting that Bill Simmons went there, because we have to mention Bill Simmons working on the Vince McMahon documentary.
Yes, which was interesting. He noted when they were discussing the comparisons between the Andre the Giant documentary that they called a very collaborative process between WWE and Bill Simmons, noting that this Vince series, not as collaborative, whatever you want to read into that. For Bill Simmons' part, like obviously he has a very lengthy relationship with Nick Khan. I thought that Bill Simmons.
And what's the obvious there? Did he?
I mean, he to my knowledge, he represented Bill Simmons.
Okay.
As a client. And I mean, just hearing them on this interview, like they hang out together at games. Like they seem very close. I don't think
seems pretty friendly with like pretty much everybody he talks to.
I will say, like Bill Simmons, I'm not going to say he was grilling Nick Khan, but I mean, he was constantly I think he was very much interested in like a lot of the palace intrigue and Stephanie leaving, but was also bringing up these allegations. And Vince, has Vince properly addressed these in the public? And there was points in this interview where it's the most I've heard Nick Khan really trying to like bend around to try and like, Nick is a very smooth operator. And I did feel there were points in here where he did not come off great. And Nick Khan typically comes off great.
Yeah, I would agree. At the same time, God, I don't know how anybody on the side of the WWE could come across anything but not great, at best. When you're talking about topics like that, just to simply be attached in a working relationship with Vince McMahon, how do you defend that?
There's no defending it. There's no defending all these allegations against Vince McMahon about the culture that he fostered in this company, about, questions of, why, with an individual like this, what is the hiring process? Why, what was your rationale for bringing in a Jamie Horowitz when he has, the baggage attached to him of why he left Fox? There is many, many questions of what you can go into, but Nick Khan is in a position where he needs to make this seem as though, he's talking about the fact that anyone who believed this retirement was going to stick, they don't know Vince McMahon. It's like, to me, that's a pretty damning statement that I expect will probably end up in one of these shareholder lawsuits. You're telling us that a publicly traded company pretty much had a sham retirement that we knew from the get-go was a sham retirement.
I would contend that maybe the way he meant it was that Vince isn't going to, he works way too hard to want to just kind of sit on a farm and just rest. You knew he was going to unretire and get back in the game.
Well, that was not stated, and that I'm sure was not part of their filing when he stepped down. That he will be back.
Well, I mean, a line he did say was like him talking about how much he respected Vince's move, essentially, of like, getting away from, like, please, you probably have the more direct quote than I do, but it was something.
He essentially, he was like, he stepped away for a couple months so that the heat could die down, and he's happy that
he said like the people like that or something to that effect. Like the people like it when you duck away from allegations for 5 to 6 months. Like, but anyway, he was speaking as if it was like a chess move that was well played by Vince. And I don't know if you like, maybe that's just a bit of self-awareness, about the succession aspect of it all. Which
you throw away the like moral questions in just a strict power play maneuver. I mean, Vince McMahon has orchestrated an unbelievable plan of how he has gotten back here. I mean, this maneuvering is pretty hard to fathom that he has successfully pulled off.
Yeah, absolutely. But I guess I wouldn't necessarily just expect Nick Khan to, outright say that was a good play, Vince, but he, I don't know. Maybe I get the sense that it's more of like him kind of like earning the trust of the audience, perhaps, and maybe earning the trust of the interviewer to be able to say that he could speak on that level. And ultimately, like what is his role here? He's there to manage the numbers of this company and to make sure that they're profitable.
And is probably the closest conduit to Vince McMahon on that board of directors. I would say more than anyone else, save for like Barrios and Wilson. But I mean, in terms of running the company, like Nick Khan is the one. He was meeting with Vince once a month while he was gone, and he said the first month, Vince was doing great. By month 5, which would have been December, he was ready to come back. And December 20th,
he said that he was like there to essentially check up, and like he would say that they would be talking about non-business related things. And he also mentioned other people on the board would do that as well.
What are these two talking about non-business related?
I'm sure sports.
How do how do you think the Bills are going to do this season, Vince?
I wonder if Vince, spent that much time.
Do you want to go see Avatar next month when we meet up? Do you want to do a book club? Yeah. What are Vince and Nick Khan sitting down and meeting and discussing that is non-business related? I would love to know. But he did state that when Vince left, he was not swooping in, and it was a real break. Even though Hunter has acknowledged in these talent meetings that he has talked to Vince, but he's got the final say. It was interesting. Bill Simmons brought up that he had heard Stephanie had been kind of going on like this quiet tour, meeting with a lot of influential figures to pretty much put a new face on the company. And when Bill Simmons heard about this through the grapevine, that he believed, okay, Vince is definitely not coming back if Stephanie is doing this quiet little PR tour. And Nick, you could hear him. He was very, he seemed very surprised at Bill Simmons. He's like, oh, you had heard about that. That was a very interesting.
Is that surprising? I mean, Bill Simmons, you would assume, like, especially working on a documentary like this, would be a bit more well connected than
I am sure Bill Simmons is very plugged in on WWE business at the moment, and being involved in this project and having probably a lot of direct involvement with Vince McMahon, depending on how this Netflix series is going, which, seems like it is moving forward. But when he had Ariel on Helwani on last week, the term he used was that this series is evolving. And then today in this, he was, saying it's not as collaborative. Like, I am certain that there's probably a documentary in there about the making of this documentary series.
Mm-hmm. The fact that he's even still talking about it as if it's still in production tells you that we might be able to expect actual focus on the past year of Vince McMahon's life.
He did not go into any family dynamics among the McMahons. He says that is my number one rule around family-run businesses is you don't get involved with the family stuff. And so he has purposely avoided it. He knows that gave a glowing representation of Stephanie's work as an executive, and that she's done for now. Nothing is permanent. Has no particulars about what went down with Shane McMahon and Vince last year. called the reports last week of a pending sale to the Saudi Arabia public investment fund 100% fake. But that, the process is going through, and outlined, like, there are a bunch of ideas that they could have. They could merge with a company. They could sell to a company. We could buy someone. It's all about what is the best value for the shareholder, followed by what is the best for Vince McMahon. But the shareholder is first and foremost. When he was asked about Vince, has he addressed these allegations to the public in a sufficient form? And Nick Khan just used that as a chance to say that Vince does not enjoy doing press, mentioning Bob Costas and Armin Katan from 20 years ago. And thus he did not speak publicly about these allegations. This was like one step removed from, well, Vince has to live with the knowledge that these allegations are out there. That's enough.
He might hate doing interviews, but he sure loves appearing on his own product. And I mean, is that not a platform, to get into something like that?
Yeah, maybe Byron Saxton can interview him about the
joining me at this time. Yeah. It's certainly anytime you get to hear Nick Khan, we learn maybe a little bit more about how he reacts under these sort of situations. And from all accounts, the man seems incredibly confident at being able to handle any sort of like hot topic issue. And I would say, maybe most listening to this felt like he probably did a very good job at fielding, enough maybe hard hitting questions while at the same time deflecting enough. But there's certainly those deflections that like, I think we're starting to notice a little bit more.
They were pretty glaring to me in this one. Like, this to me was not a, Nick Khan is still, even in a setting like this, like, he is a very smooth talker, and he's very, very knowledgeable. You can never take that against him.
He's everybody's friend, it seems.
Yeah. But I thought he did not come out glowing from this just because of how dismissive he was. At the same time, I could see other people that maybe are not as concerned about that aspect that listen to this, and it's a lot of insight into the company and the dynamics, and it's an hour of Nick Khan that's going to be engaging. And I guess the final portion was bringing up AEW and Bill Simmons, classifying them as, the first real competitor they have had in a long, long time. And maybe the line that, Nick Khan could not have sounded like more dismissive of Tony Khan than when he's asked about him. And his quote was, "I've never met the kid, Tony Khan. Seems like a nice kid. I don't know him." And then goes on to say, "I met his dad, that him and Stephanie were at a luncheon a year and a half ago and happened to be seated next to Shahid Khan and was very, very impressed with Shahid Khan, but not the kid. Seems like a nice kid."
TK should be standing for the kid from now on. You want to play the age game, John? How old is Nick Khan?
I'm going to say Nick Khan is, the fact you're bringing this up means like they have to be much more closer in age than I'm imagining. I'm going to say Nick Khan is 52.
Okay. How old is Tony Khan?
Tony Khan, I believe, is 40.
Tony Khan is 40. Nick Khan, big man, big adult that he is 46.
Wow.
There is a 6-year age gap between the two. And to call him that kid is, God, just...
It was such a backhanded... like insult. I promise you that line will someday come back in a Tony Khan rebuttal. I promise you. Like, there will be a time that if Dynamite tops ratings, you will see a not too bad kid.
I like that nickname for TK. That kid.
Tony,
I like it.
Tony the Kid. I mean, it was just such a an amazing line that he threw in there. And then he just got into more like sports rights discussions, bringing up the fact there's only 10 to 11% overlap between the WWE and UFC audience. Is there a need for Ronda Rousey then?
Well, I guess you could argue that she's there to attract a different audience.
She's the exception.
Well, she's there to attract a different audience.
His argument was like that, a potential landing spot. They could land on ESPN, and they would be very valuable to ESPN Plus because they would be bringing a different audience than they are currently getting from the UFC. It's not as though we have these subscribers that we wouldn't be growing our subscribers because it's a lot of overlap. There isn't, and therefore we'd be valuable. We'd be valuable to all of these different streaming properties. And it was interesting, like when they
buy our stock, everybody is essentially
it's a bargain at 90.
Yeah.
but they were bringing up like potential places to go. And whenever Nick Khan doesn't want to directly say something, his response was, well, what do you think, Bill? And Bill would just state it, and you just get Nick like, yeah, that's
Or he'd
interesting.
bring up an example from Bill's life story, you know, like, oh, when you sold Grantland, such and such, you know, you're very successful. You have like that type of thing.
I have listened to interviews with Nick Khan with people where he has brought up something from their past that was like, this guy is not just going, this guy is never going into an interview cold.
If you
like,
ever interviewed him, John, like, I don't know, maybe he'd bring up like politics or something. You know?
I would not be surprised at all. Okay, that
or Aqua, your love of Aqua, maybe.
Well, I don't know about that one, but I would have had several follow-ups in this interview. But no, I thought honestly, like Bill Simmons did bring up a lot of topics. I don't want to classify this as though he was just there, not asking like good questions.
It tells me that he himself understands he has credibility that he needs to protect, and that gives me a bit of hope for this documentary.